Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name's Daniel Pigeon, and I am product marketing at CyberInt. With me today, we have Shmuel Gihon, who's the security research team lead at CyberInt. And we are going to be covering a webinar that is assessing the cyber threat landscape in the US. So we have a live webinar today. Me and Shmuel are here to answer any questions that you might have. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer them along the way, but we also have some time reserved at the end for Q&A. And of course, this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on the BrightTalk platform. So feel free to share that with colleagues if you find this content useful. And with that, Shmuel, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So hi, everyone. As Daniel already mentioned, I'm a security research team lead here in CyberInt. And this is an assessing of the cybersecurity threat landscape in the United States. And let's get going. So the agenda for today's webinar is basically having a quick introduction about the threats and why the United States in particular. We're going to talk about phishing and smishing attacks. We're going to talk about the infrastructures threat, supply chain attacks, ransomware. Of course, we have to touch the hacktivists. And we'll talk a little bit about generative AI and its risks. And we'll wrap it up with risk mitigation strategy. So, why the United States? The US is the number one most targeted nation, almost when compared to every other state in the world, also comparing to any other threat in the world. It's the largest economy, of course, and it's the third largest population globally, which means there's a lot of targets to target eventually. 25% of Fortune 500 companies are based in the United States. And of course, the United States is a global leader in tech and innovation, which means you have a lot of strong companies that you can harass, that you can rather gain financially or gain in matters of popularity. So the first and most, let's say, annoying threat that the United States suffer from is phishing attacks and smishing attacks. Over the years, we have seen an increased rate of phishing attacks, and it became a tool, a technique, if you will, that every type of threat actor uses. So we can see small-time threat actors use it. We can see state-sponsored espionage groups use it sometimes. Phishing attacks became an entry level, but also a very solid initial access tool for threat actors around the world. And we can see that if we look at the years 2019 to 2022, we can see a huge spike of cases that were documented in phishing for good reason. Why and how phishing kits can accelerate the attack process? Well, first of all, ever since the whole industry of phishing kits became relevant, it lowered the barrier of threat actors that can play this game. So it basically let less skilled threat actors apply phishing techniques, phishing methods. You can basically have your own campaign in a matter of $100 or $200, and you already have your phishing campaign going on these days. It's a fast and easy way to steal money, of course, and data. And you can see you can see how successful it is because we have a 150% increase in phishing attacks year over year since 2019. This is a huge spike, and it's consistently going up, by the way. This is an example of a phishing kit that CyberInt analysts found lately. You can see that this is a basic and pretty much, let's say, common structure of a phishing kit. You can see that it handles credit cards, it handles email addresses, login credentials. Pretty much this kit was designed to take all of this information from its victims to later purposes. Now, if we move forward to smishing, smishing is another technique that a lot of the times is not being noticed or mentioned enough. I think that a lot of cases, people mostly afraid of phishing attacks, but smishing became another pretty noticeable threat to people around the world, especially in the United States. And a lot of the times, it looks you can see this is two examples for a smishing campaign that we have found, and you can see the call for action, and you can see urgency in the urgency in the content of this phishing attacks. So a lot of the times it's something that will lead to another phishing campaign, and sometimes it will lead to a deployment of any malicious code or malicious malware. Sorry. Basically, what smishing this is a basic diagram of how smishing actually works when bypassing MFA, because of course that a lot of the times MFA or two-factor authentication might help in case that your credentials were leaked, but a lot of the smishing attacks already simulating and bypassing MFAs. So what we see here in the top, and we have the attacker, and the attacker gains first. He has to understand what is its attack surface. So he needs to get some phone numbers that he can target. He a lot of the time gets it from third-party data breaches. He also gets it from public directories, which is shockingly how open it is, and insider information. Once it has all the potential victims, of course, he initiates a. It a lot of the time. A lot of the time, you can buy even a very simple SMS sender for a few bucks, and he uses this to send multiple SMSs to all these victims. Once the victim opens the SMS, he visits the phishing site, and he enter his credits. He enters his credentials, and he's being redirected to a fraudulent 2FA interface. But in this stage, the threat actor already have the victim's credential, so the threat actor tries to log in to the service, let's say Instagram or Facebook or I don't know, whatever, and once the threat actor gets the 2FA, then he sends the request of the 2FA for the victim received and enters a genuine 2FA to the fraudulent page that he got in the first place. At that point, the threat actor has the 2FA code to himself, and he's able to bypass the MFA and pretty much result to account takeover or data leakage or data breach. The possibilities are endless in this case.
I've got one question I want to throw at you here, Shmuel. So this seems like a pretty sophisticated attack because it starts with smishing, and then the victim is sent to a phishing site, and then after that, there's another phishing site, which is like the fraudulent two-factor authentication interface. So is this something that you're seeing often? And also, does the phishing kit that you mentioned on the previous few slides, which parts of this attack does the phishing kit help with?
So threat actors have to keep up with today's security solutions, right? So the 2FA was a big problem for threat actors, for phishing threat actors around the world. They had to adopt. So this is why they deployed this two-phase attack, two phases, phishing and smishing attacks, that looks pretty much like this, right? And it's important to understand that a lot of the result, the impact of these attacks are not just, stealing my Instagram account or stealing my Facebook account, right? It can lead to much more complex and impressive, let's say, attacks by these threat actors, because a lot of the times the access can be moved to ransomware groups. It can be sold to espionage groups, data leakage group. So the impact of these types of attack might be huge. Depends on how the threat actor should respond and want to respond to the access he gained.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Moving forward to info stealers. So to whoever does it that don't know what info stealers are, it's a type of malware that its sole purpose, or most of its purpose is to steal sensitive data from the infected computer. And a lot of the times the data is also being maybe sold or transferred to other threat groups. They have a lot of use cases to that. It became, let's be honest, infosteers are, I don't know, we have some records of infosteer going back to 2004, 2005 even. It's not a new threat, but it became way more common in recent years. It became way more common in since early 2021. You can see it not just in how many victims you have, but you can see it as an industry. And you can see that you have way more malwares and not just way more victims. And you have a lot of third-party services that support infosteers campaigners. And you have seen that this market became one of the major markets for threat actors these days. And to be honest, it's pretty sad that a lot of the times you can see that it goes pretty much under the radar when it comes to the authorities and law enforcement and stuff like that. It's still hard to track and to stop this phenomenon. Basically, what the data that is under risk when it comes to infosteers are credentials, financial information, PIIs, cookies, crypto wallets, screenshots, operating system information, and sometimes you can have even personal files and other valuable information and other valuable assets to the victim. Here we see an example of a threat actor, a campaigner, that already runs a infosteer campaign. He runs two infosteers. The one is Redline, the second is MetaStealer. Both malwares are pretty, both steals are pretty popular. And he sells a subscription, right? He sells subscription for 1 week, one month, 3 months, and lifetime. Now, what does this subscription basically get you? Is it gets you a logs of all of its victims, all of its new victims in the past week, month, 3 months, or lifetime. So this campaigner, the campaigner itself doesn't use the credentials, doesn't care about the credentials, but it only passed them along to its subscribers. When it comes to the top targeted nations in infosteers, the US is number 5, is the 5th most targeted country, along with Argentina and India. It's not a shocker here because eventually the US has a lot of citizens, a lot of targets, and given the fact that infosteers is as a commodity malware, it targets individuals and companies. It only makes sense that the United States will be in the top 5, top 10 of the infosteers industry. When it comes to the top platforms, which means this is the most stolen credentials that we have seen that Gmail leads the boards with no surprise. We have Hotmail, Yahoo, Outlook, and iCloud. Now, it's important to understand that these are the platforms, the 5 targeted platforms in the United States, and not just around the world. So if we look at India, for example, the platforms might be different. In addition to that, we have seen the top 5 platforms targeted by infosteers by number of infections. So we have seen that the most targeted platforms in here is Google, Facebook, Roblox, Microsoft, and Instagram. Okay, so if we look at distribution techniques, it's always curious to see how threat actors are creative enough to find new and advanced techniques to deploy, because eventually the business model of infosteer is I give you the sample, I give you the infrastructure, but you're the one that is in charge of the delivery. And this is where it's pretty challenging to find new ways and to track all the ways the threat actors look to deploy and to deliver their malwares. So we have, but the top ones that we have seen are the community platform, which means that In this case, we can see, for example, Discord groups and Telegram channels and Instagram accounts, and the focal and gathering point of a lot of people will most likely be a great attraction to threat actors and info-status campaigners, given the fact that it's much easier to and cheaper, by the way, to make a social engineering impact on the potential victims. So let's say we have seen, for example, community platforms that we have seen cryptocurrency, for example, cryptocurrency server, Discord server, that eventually the social engineering techniques was that the threat actors used the platform to send all the people, the members of the platform, fake messages about new leads in cryptocurrency and stuff like that, eventually leading to a deployment of info-stealers. Another case that we have seen is phishing websites. Sorry, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of the times they use phishing kits in order to, rather if it's on mails and email or Facebook DMs. They use this methods to deploy their malwares as well, and of course malicious ads. But malicious ads is something that is pretty pricey because eventually they need to run an ad campaign on Google, for example, and they need to actually spend money to be in front of the be in the front page, or And the problem here is that when you see a malicious ad, this means that the threat actors are more, let's say, experienced, because they probably have money to run these ads. And a lot of the time, these ads might be very pricey, because if I am going to pay for an ad campaign that should look like a mainstream service like Spotify, for example, I'm paying a lot for that. So these campaigns are most likely by more experienced and threat actors that have more funds available to them.
Shmuel, we had one question come in from John. He's asking, is there any reason why Brazil is so high up on the InfoStealer ranking? So from a few slides back where Brazil was at the top of the chart.
Yeah.
Any ideas there?
Well, from my experience, when I see countries like Brazil and Peru, I know that a lot of the times threat actors that are active in this part of the world are trying to leverage political and news-related topics to deploy their malwares. And I'm not sure that it is a technique that will work probably in the US, but it is something that I've seen that works a lot in Brazil and Peru. I believe that it might be that there is a chance, of course, no offense to anyone, but of course that there is a chance that it's a matter of security awareness maybe, and it's a matter of other, some sort of alert that people should be ready for. And a lot of the times they use mass spam in this type of in this part of the world. They use a lot of mass spam campaigns, talking about geopolitical stuff and talking about recent news. Social engineering works better, obviously, in Brazil, but there is no. Other than that, I can't say too much about why Brazil is in the first place by this much than Peru. Or the United States, of course. By the way, if we just let's hang up on this just a little bit. If we look at this technique 3 years back, India suffered a lot from that when it came to when COVID started. So a lot of threat actors made huge mail spam campaigns of COVID, of vaccination, of all of this topic-related issues, and a lot of people in India suffered from massive campaigns, info-status campaign, because of that.
Wow, that's really interesting. I guess at that time, everybody wanted as much information they could get about
Yeah,
COVID
yeah,
and stuff. So it makes sense that that would, trick people into engaging with those emails.
yeah, of course. And of course, even more let's say devastating attacks happened at that point with this technique. The ransomware groups, and they pretty much uh, did the best they could, and the ransomware industry got a really big spike given this technique. Okay, so now let's talk about supply chain attacks. Supply chain attack is probably one of the most complex, I would say, attacks to mitigate and to detect, um, and to even look forward to, or defend ourselves from. We did divide it to three separate sections. So we have a third party who has privileged access, which are credentials to VPN gateways. We have corporate apps, all of this type of services that we use daily in our day-to-day, at least in our business environment. We have the third party who holds our data, which is our SaaS suppliers, the cloud services that we use, marketing vendors, even physical vendors in a way. And we have the ones that provide us technologies. This is the hardware providers, software vendors, and of course you see other examples. Now the problem with supply chain attack, that you can do the best you can as an enterprise, as a business, to protect yourself. You can buy the best vendors. You can be really vigilant, and you can do the security awareness to your employees every day. But eventually, you can't you can protect yourself from a vendor that has your information and he doesn't apply these practices. And if we look at 3 4 years even back, supply chain attacks were initiated by mostly big threat groups like espionage, stat sponsored groups. It was very high and complex operations and campaigns. We had SolarWinds, which is the number one maybe example for supply chain attacks. And until this day, a lot of the victims there, we still don't know the scale of the victimology in this particular case. So it used to be state sponsored groups and big groups, and now you can see that the ransomware groups and the data leakage groups already starting to apply and understand this technology and understand this, let's say, fragile infrastructure that they can exploit to target to get as many victims as possible. And I think that the most recent example for that is the MOVEit campaign, that was mostly initiated by Clop ransomware, but we still see around maybe the attacker became okay. So let's start from the beginning. Basically, what happened is that, well, Club is a ransomware group that enjoys exploiting 0 days. This is their main modus operandi, and this is something that they know to do the best, or this is what they specialize in. And they have discovered a 0 day vulnerability in the MOVEit file transfer application. They understand that they're able to get a lot of data that other organizations have, because it's stored in MOVEit servers. So if we move forward, we can see that in many cases, the customer, as I already mentioned, they paid to use the MOVEit the software. We're using it to share data with other businesses. So even if we look at this point alone, we can see how problematic it is. Many businesses who were not MOVEit customers had sensitive data stolen by bad actors also, of course. And some organizations were hit with ransomware, others were extorted with data leak threats. And finally, we can see today that over 1,000 organizations suffered a data breach as a result of the Moveit attack, which is huge.
Yeah, and I remember reading that there was quite a big number of high-profile companies. I think British Airways. There was a couple of chains in the UK. I want to say either Tesco or maybe it was Booths, one of their big pharmacy chains. But
Yeah,
all these organizations that were not even using MoveIt still suffered, a huge cyber incident that I'm sure was very costly because they were working with a third-party organization that happened to be using MoveIt, like a
yeah,
third-party service provider. So it's almost like fourth or fifth party risk at that point because there's a company that's providing software to another company that's a service provider that's doing business with a number of other companies, and then all of a sudden
yeah.
you wind up with a
No, but
thousand
it's
victims.
also a lot of the times, a lot of the times the jewels that the threat actors found in the movie, given the movie vulnerability, the movie 0 day, they were enough. A lot of the times they didn't even had to encrypt. So you had a state where you saw in the first days of how it started. You see that in the first couple of days, you just see Klopp's site, publishing 20 victims a day, and the victims themselves, they didn't see anything. They didn't see anything in their systems, and they didn't see anything encrypted. Didn't see any ransom note. They didn't see nothing, and this is why a lot of the times, they there was at some point they just didn't understand like how all my stuff is with Klopp now, and I don't have any information, any alerts about it, nothing. So a lot of the times, Klopp found things that they knew that the victims would pay only not to be leaked. They didn't even had to encrypt it. So
Wow.
this is why this campaign is a really huge, has had a huge and still having a huge impact on a lot of victims around the world. And as you can be sure that as much as we study it and its techniques and how it's performed, threat actors also study it, and they're already looking for the next movie campaign.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they also targeted a different file transfer application earlier this year, right? I
Yeah,
think it was called Go
they had
Anywhere.
the paper. Yeah, they had several campaigns. They had the Go Anywhere. They had the paper cut. This is why I said that vulnerability exploitation is their main. This is what they specialized in, because unlike other groups, you can see by their activity, you can see spikes of activity. You don't see like a solid 10, 15 victims a day. They, a lot of the times, they found like a very good vulnerability to exploit, and they had like a spike of victims over time. Move It is the most successful campaigns they had, I think, ever since, in the past at least 2 years, in my opinion. And you see they have like a spike, and then you will not hear from them from like, you will have maybe drops of victims here and there until the next greatest campaign.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah. Which leads us to ransomware, of course.
Perfect transition.
You can't have a threat landscape webinar without ransomware, especially in the United States. So yeah, as we can see, the ransomware industry is just keeps on getting better and better in a way. They had a huge spike in 2021 after 2022 was another great year, but on 2022 in particular, it was mostly led by 2 or 3 families, where 21 more families gathered along. 2022 was the year when Conti died. So Conti was a very major group, but you see that the ransomware industry kept pretty much on the same numbers when it comes to victims, at least. And 23 might be the most successful year for ransomware groups in history, maybe, because we only in H1 we almost have the same number that we did in the entire 2022. And just to make things clear, H1 was just before the start of the Move It campaign. So, or at least when people understand the scale of the Move It campaign. So we can be pretty sure that 23 will be very, very successful to threat actors, unfortunately, of course, for ransomware groups. Other than that, you can see the industry leaders, at least to date, which is Lockbit and Clop, AlphaV. So these three groups are the most, the most experienced groups. Of course, it's in the United States, so this is why we don't see the 1,000 victims we promised by Clop. But these are the top groups in the United States, and you can see that Lockbit, Clop, and AlphaV. So those are the most experienced groups. They're the most professional groups. AlphaCat is, I don't know, it's I think in the third or fourth iteration of the same group. There used to be DarkSide back in the days. Clop remained Clop. Lockbit with the third iteration, Lockbit 3.0. They just keep delivering more and more victims, and this just to understand how good they were this year. Lockbit was pretty much inactive for around a month because they had to went on they wanted to cash out in a way. They wanted to go on a vacation, a long vacation. They already said it. So this number of victims is with 1, maybe 2 months even of a break. This is very important to understand. Other than that, you have a lot of new groups that join that also targeting the United States, of course. We have Royal, which is pretty new, Play, Beyond Lian, 8base. All of these groups are groups that are looking up for the more experienced ones, and they're also making the best efforts to leave their mark on the United States organizations and to target as much as possible, of course. When it comes to the top 10 industries in the United States, you can see that the business sector, the services sector, is the most targeted one. I do believe that the healthcare, I think that the healthcare it's pretty misfortunate to see that this is the second most targeted sector in the United States, especially when back in the days, and I mean 2 years back even, ransomware groups said that the healthcare is a big no. They will never target the healthcare sector. They're better than this, and 2 years later, it seems like they're not that better than this. So you have the healthcare second most targeted sector. You have the engineering and research, which is the more tech related industries, education, retail, and so on.
So yeah. I want to ask one question about the healthcare shift, because I do remember that actually a few years ago, the threat actors had some rules, I guess you could say, like that. There were some lines that they didn't want to cross, and they thought that maybe attacking hospitals was unethical, or maybe it would attract too much attention from law enforcement agencies and things like this. So they largely left it alone. But now I think this year we've seen many healthcare organizations and even hospitals suffering ransomware attacks. So I wonder what changed. Do you have any insights there?
Yeah, because when you have a lot of opportunities, then you don't mind being the better man and the bigger man and say, yeah, no, I will never target the healthcare. Of course you won't target the healthcare, because every sector 2-3 years before today, 2-3 years ago, every sector pretty much was not that educated, not that mature about ransomware attacks. The security vendors, the defense vendors we know today, they have improved their mechanisms way better and their techniques just to stop ransomware. We have the entire operation around the world, the hashtag stop ransomware, right? It became way more notable, and most of the organization worldwide, not just our clients, this is one of the scariest threats for them. This is why they always ask first, what about ransomware? How am I, where am I standing in front of this threat, right? So 2-3 years ago, a lot of business services, the services sector, sorry, businesses, they were less educated. I wouldn't say uneducated, but they were less mature about it. So the ransomware groups had a lot of success there. They have a lot of success in the education and in the tech and the retail. They had in the manufacturing, of course. They have a lot of other places to go than the healthcare. So of course they will say, I will never target the healthcare. But then when the services became better and start to invest more in their defenses, and the manufacturing, of course, with all the patents they have, and and the retail, all of these sectors prepare themselves better. So they had to try a little bit in the education, and you had to try a little bit in the healthcare. And once the first or second or third group pretty much normalized it, then suddenly it's gone. Suddenly it's fine to target the healthcare sector,
Right. That makes a lot of sense, especially, if the healthcare industry previously thought that they were not going to be attacked, maybe they thought that it wasn't such a threat. They didn't have to worry about ransomware as much as other companies.
No.
And then things changed very quickly. And now I think we're seeing the
Yeah.
results here, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a mouse and cat game, and if you're staying, if you're being, let's say, if you think that if you're being too optimistic about your security perimeter, then you might suffer for the long term, no doubt. Okay, so the next threat that we would like to talk about is hacktivism, of course, and the United States has a lot of hacktivists targeting them. We will show a couple of examples in a bit. But we have these three types of, let's say, motivational threat groups. So we have the hacktivists, we have the financially motivated, the cyber criminals eventually, and we have the nation state sponsored actors, which are the most sophisticated and problematic groups to a lot of people. And what we have seen in the past, let's say even 6 months recently, that we see that there is some sort of alignment between the three, some sort of corporation between these three entities. Not always, not in the same variations. I would never compare the skill of a nation state actor to a hacktivist group actor. But you can see that the lines becoming a little bit blurry, and you can see that a lot of the times, hacktivist groups can use the infrastructure of cyber criminals, and we have a little bit of trade-off between one another. This is something that we haven't seen up until the past 6, maybe 7 months. So, and also you can see cases where cyber criminals, which mostly doing, for example, ransomware, suddenly do a hacktivist campaign, or playing along with the hacktivist campaign, or helping a hacktivist campaign. I think that we have seen this starting, only in very, very few, 2, 3, maybe 4 groups when the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. But today we're seeing some sort of a trend line where groups helping each other in a way that it's very, very suspicious. But I think that they have come to the realization that they need each other, because our perimeter, the defensive perimeter, became way stronger than it used to be. So we have a couple of examples. We have SiegeSec, for example. SiegeSec is a known faction of hacktivists that is it is aligned with Russia and Russia region, let's say, agenda. The most noticeable case was the NATO breach in July. They leaked hundreds of sensitive documents online, and earlier this year in February they launched a campaign against Atlassian, which also was very alarming at first. But then we have seen that what they have stolen was something that was, let's say, I wouldn't say not relevant, but less relevant than what people first thought, for at least. Another good thing about SiegeSec is that they're a faction of Anonymous, which no one actually is. There is no actual group these days that is anonymous. It's a movement, but they have these factions. They have SiegeSec, and they have a lot of other groups that says that they are anonymous. So we have Anonymous Sudan, maybe the most popular group, I think, this year when it comes to hacktivism. It's an activist group that is pretty interesting, let's put it this way. They're unofficially aligned with Sudan, so a lot of people don't think they're actually from Sudan. Neither do I, to be honest. They have targeted major corporations, including Riot Games, Microsoft Outlook, for example. They have partnered with other threat groups such as REvil and Killnet. Now, this is interesting because REvil is, let's say, in the base of it is a ransomware group. So it's a cyber criminal group. And Killnet was a lot of the times associated with the Russian government. And then you have a hacktivist group, Anonymous Sudan, join forces with these two, declaring war on the United States and the West in general. This is a really good case of the diagram we had before, because Anonymous Sudan uses highly funded infrastructure to their attacks, and you can get it. A hacktivist group does not able to get this type of infrastructure unless it is linked to a criminal group or a state-sponsored group. This is the infrastructure are really pricey. So you see how this cooperation between groups are inevitable in some cases.
Do you think that there's a chance that some of these groups that are hacktivists or pretending to be hacktivists, could they be sponsored by some adversarial government or by some intelligence agencies that belong to a foreign government, and perhaps this is it's all just like a mask to make it seem like they're a hacktivist group when really it's some sort of state-sponsored activity?
Yeah, I think that Anonymous Sudan was it's still an interesting case that is exactly that. A lot of people was pretty much were convinced that Anonymous Sudan are not really hacktivists. They're state sponsored, and they're doing a lot of things that are more related to espionage than just DDoSing groups and DDoSing countries. To be honest, I think that hacktivist groups a lot of the times try to make their way as they express a certain agenda that will promote them in the eyes of the governments they want to work with, maybe, or to be part of, in the other hand. So I wouldn't say Anonymous Sudan is state sponsored. I don't think they are. And we have released a big report regarding the blog that you're just showing right now. It's a big report regarding the Anonymous Sudan origin and where they're from, and full analysis of this threat group. And I wouldn't say that they're. I mean, I don't think that they have the criteria, let's say, of a state-sponsored group. I'm pretty convinced that they are really real hacktivists.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And another example, of course, if we're talking about state-sponsored groups, we have Killnet. Now, Killnet has launched a big DDoS attack on U.S. airports. They did it in October 2022. They had 24 airport websites offline. Of course, it didn't stop any. Not sure that it stopped any flights or canceled any flights, but it is something that a lot of the times they wanted to do. Now, they are aligned with Russian political objectives. So let's say if we're going back to your question before, I think that Killnet might be able to get some connections to the Russian government, not getting directions from them, but they probably have some connection to them. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Killnet is more experienced, also they're a little bit more veteran in this game, and an interesting thing is that once Anonymous Sudan joined forces with Killnet, you have seen that Anonymous Sudan attacks were way more devastating, and you see that they had way better techniques in their campaigns. They used like more advanced DDoS attacks. So you see that joining forces with Killnet will probably give him access to more strong and better infrastructure to launch their DDoS attacks from.
All right, I just want to say that we're a little bit over the 45-minute mark. I think this webinar was scheduled for 45 minutes. Shmuel, if you've got a bit more time, we can finish
Yeah.
up. But in case anyone who has joined us needs to drop off, I just want to say thanks for taking the time to join us today, and I think we can go for another 5 minutes or so here. So
Yeah.
let's finish up.
Okay, so let's run it through. When it comes to generative AI, we have it's a new technology, but it's also a new kind of risk, in my opinion. We need to be responsible with that, of course. The main risk here is that by using generative AI, or at least modules like ChatGPT, for example, of course, is that we might unintentionally spread sensitive business data. There is the risk of prompt injection techniques that will pretty much turn AI into a threat. And of course, the this is something that we already talked about in the past: the faster attack cycle for bad actors. Um, yeah, so this is something that we should definitely look out for. The impact of hacked GPT account is a research that we have done also as part of our threat landscape in the United States, where we try to find to see how many ChatGPT's accounts we can find being sold in the dark web or by campaigners, and we have found a huge amount of ChatGPT accounts. And the problem with having an access to a ChatGPT account is not that I can use the module that I already could use. The problem is that OpenAI, when you have an account, you have all the history of the account that you can go through and see every type of information that this user put into to the ChatGPT. So, for example, if I'm as a programmer put code there and asked him for do a QA for my code, or if I'm trying to, I don't know, having some ideas or try or give ChatGPT tasks of, giving creating email that I should, send to the entire company. All of this information is available. You can see all these secrets, and you can see all of it and it might lead to a major data leak using this stolen accounts eventually, of course. Arrests and shutdown. So not always bad. I think that the United States government and law authorities around the world, to be honest, putting a lot of their efforts in the past 6 months to show that they're here, that they're hunting those threat actors, and they're actually trying to make things way better. Now, the most popular, I think, threat actor that has been arrested was Pompompurin. Pompompurin was a major veteran threat actor that led and created. It was the admin of the breach forums forum. He is responsible for advertising malwares and data leaks and compromised credentials and whatnot. And to be honest, he was only 21 years old. His name is Connor Bryan, and I think that this arrest made a lot of noise in the underground because you can see that a lot of threat actors were way more suspicious back in the days. The other arrest that we wanted to talk about was the two Lockbit affiliates that were arrested by the feds. I think it was in June, maybe. Yeah, it was in June, and this is something that this story was pretty interesting because we had, in one hand, we have affiliates that were arrested, and there were major affiliates, by the way. They were very active within the group. On the other hand, you can see that the group was very cold regarding their arrest. So when the group was asked, like, how do you feel now when your affiliates are gone, or what do you think about your affiliate that has been arrested? The group just coldly answered, he should have done a better OPSEC. And that's about it. So I think that it shows a lot about the relationship between the affiliates and the operators themselves, the ransomware operators, the ransomware groups themselves. And yeah, so I think that we're in a really good place in a way, but there's still ones that are enlarged. There's still ones that we don't have and we probably won't have any access to in the next couple of years. A good example is Mikhail Pavlovich. Mikhail Pavlovich is also known as Wazawaka. He's a very highly skilled affiliate of Lockbit, and this guy is wanted for $10 million by the FBI, and he got the headlines because of the bounty, but he's wanted for, I think, a good amount of years. Like, he's wanted for at least 2 years, I think 3 years. That people know him, people know where he is, but there's some places in the world that when you just can't get into, and this is the problem with the cyber security, the cyber realm. Let's put it this way: that you can pretty much go into places where the FBI doesn't have access to, can come to take you away. But I mean, United States does the best it can, and the United States join forces with a lot of law enforcement around the world to catch who they can. So if those affiliates come to anywhere in Europe, they're probably going to get arrested. If they're in the United States, obviously they will get arrested. We have seen the cases before, and so yeah, I think that it leads us to how can we mitigate and defend ourselves a little better. So if we try to conclude all the cases that we have seen in the United States and all the latest and greatest campaigns that happened in the past 6-7 months, we try to understand what are the better strategies here. So patch management, of course, it's something that we have to keep our hands, keep our eyes open, and really really try to understand how we can keep up with it, because because groups like Klopp, they're thriving on this type of techniques. Train your workforce, of course. So as I already mentioned, security awareness is something that is very, very important. We should educate our employees regarding cyber attacks, TTPs, red flags to look for, especially in the social engineering techniques, stuff like that. Security first culture. We should develop a security-centric culture with our organization. It's everyone's responsibility, and rather if you're an executive, a programmer, or whatever, you should have some sort of a mindset where I need to understand. I need to be suspicious in a way to pretty much anything that I don't see my day to day. Let's put it this way. Monitoring your assets. So we have to continuously, this is something that is more of a work of a security intelligence vendors such as ours. We have to continuously monitoring our external assets for issues, vulnerabilities, risks, misconfigurations, everything like that. Threat intelligence, of course, it's the number one. I think this is one of the most important things here. We have to be on point when it comes to intelligence that is regarding our organization, because at the end of the day, if I have all the best all the best security vendors there is in the market, but I have a leaked credentials of one of my employees, then it doesn't help me a lot. So this only one use case, right? But this is where threat intelligence can help you a lot. And if we look back at the third party and supply chain attacks, manage third party risks. So you have to monitor your partners, you have to monitor your digital assets, and your third party suppliers. This is something that we also provide, but this is something that in the new era of threats, of cyber threats, you can be sure that supply chain attacks will only become more popular, and it will only become something that is more threatening and more devastating to us, especially when we have all the SaaS the SaaS solutions. And although it's great technology, it's a great thing to have, at the end of the day, this can be a weak link in our security perimeter. So yeah, I think this is also something very important.
All right, thank you, Shmuel. I'm gonna talk for just 1 minute about what we do at CyberInt. We're primarily a threat intelligence vendor, but our platform does many different things. So that includes deep and dark web monitoring, where we detect data leakages, exposed credentials, malware logs, and we also provide IOC feeds, threat actor tracking, malware intelligence. We also do attack surface management, which, as Shmuel just mentioned, it's continuously discovering and monitoring external digital assets. So things like domains and IP addresses. We're finding issues, misconfigurations, open ports, as well as possible vulnerabilities in technologies that are running on those external assets. Digital risk protection, which covers all the impersonation use cases. If a threat actor is impersonating your brand on a phishing site or on social media, or maybe even they're impersonating an executive, any sort of fraudulent schemes, fake jobs, fake job postings, all that kind of stuff is covered by the CyberInt platform. And then finally, supply chain intelligence, which is continuously monitoring your third-party vendors and suppliers for potential security risks, and incorporating all the threat intelligence that we collect to see if there's other deep and dark web threats that might be affecting your third-party vendors, which could ultimately lead to a breach of your data or a breach of your network. So that is what we do here at CyberInt. I think we've gone over time here, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll just give it a minute here. All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions come in, but I want to say thanks to everyone who joined us today. I think it was a really excellent presentation, really awesome webinar. So thank you, Shmuel, for all the research and taking the time to cover all of this.
My pleasure, of course.
All right, well, thanks to everyone who joined us. Have a wonderful day or a wonderful evening, and we hope that you join us again sometime soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.